Our group decided to explore the relationship between income per capita and the number of babies born per woman. We wanted to investigate how these two variables influenced each other and how external factors such as war, legislature, and contraception impact trends in the data. The general trend of the line between income and babies per woman is downward sloping. This is expected from the data because when income increases in rich countries, the price of everything else increases. So families spend more money per child on education, childcare, and day-to-day needs. In poorer countries, it's more beneficial to have a higher amount of children because they add to the overall family income. This is why Western countries who control most of the global wealth have fewer children but high income, where African countries have less income and a greater number of children. The richest country of Qatar has an income of $133,000 and 2 children, where the poorest countries of Somalia has an income of $629 and averages 6.36 children per woman.
Countries with lower incomes are affected significantly less by the trend that babies per woman decreases over time. Advances in contraceptives have ensured that families who do not want kids will not have them, while decrease in mortality rate due to medical advances has meant families do not need to have a high number of children to account for premature death. However, these advances are not as prevalent in third world countries. Although most countries had a high number of babies per woman in the early 1900s, currently the countries with the highest amount of babies per woman are all African nations. Many of these countries, such as Niger and Somalia, have consistently been the poorest in the world while also having the highest child mortality rates.
Our group also investigated whether or not the number of babies per woman corresponded with the development of birth control in the United States. First, we looked at when Margaret Sanger opened the first legal American birth control clinic in 1923. We thought that with this development, the U.S. birth rate would go down, and we see that the birth rate does significantly drop in the decade following 1923. Next, we examined the time after the birth control pill was approved for public use in 1960. Upon examination, we found that the number of babies per woman did indeed fall considerably in the 1960s. Due to the U.S.'s historically Christian background, birth control was socially acceptable in the U.S. after it was in Europe. This explains why the U.S.'s dot drops after most of Europe's yellow dots. Similarly, countries with a higher income can better afford birth control. The graph supports this by showing that wealthier countries' babies per woman decreased faster than underdeveloped nations.
One of the most turbulent data points on the graph is Russia. When Russia entered World War I in 1914, the amount of babies per woman fell from 6.88 to 3.68 without any significant shift in income. Following World War I, Russia's average babies per woman and income underwent rapid shifts and only stabilized during the early to mid-20s. A similar period of change occurred when Russia entered World War II. Russia's average babies per woman fell from 4.6 in 1941 to 1.68 in 1943, but stabilized quickly compared to World War I. Russia shows that countries with a rapidly fluctuating number of babies per woman are often in an unstable economic period where income is also greatly shifting.
Our group also thought it was important to consider the effects of the Great Depression. This severe worldwide recession lasted from 1929 to 1939 and affected global economies. The recession is portrayed on the graph as a decrease in income, but there is little correspondence seen between the event and babies per woman. If anything, babies per woman increased in the later years of the Depression, starting around 1933. This could possibly stem from the fact that if a family sent more children to work, then their income would rise.
The baby boom was an interesting phenomenon regarding the data that we found. Following World War II, the population boosted worldwide despite a time of reconstruction and economic growth. Specifically in the United States, 78.3 million children were born between 1946 and 1964, which was largely due to the pride in the nation's victory, the GI Bill, and overall economic growth. Within the chart, you can see in 1941, 2 years into the war, the United States had a per capita income of $13.2 thousand with 2.23 children. 16 years later, in 1957, the income was $17.4 thousand, but with 3.74 children, thus doubling the average amount of children per woman.
China is one of the more interesting data points on the graph. After Mao Zedong's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping came to power to help steer China out of a period of economic and political turbulence. Deng Xiaoping introduced the controversial one-child policy to curb China's rapidly growing population. Implemented in 1979, the one-child policy helped stabilize China's growth in the post-Mao era. Although the average babies per woman in China never quite hit 1, as the law does not apply to certain subsets of the Chinese population, such as minorities, the one-child policy has been instrumental in lowering child poverty and decreasing overpopulation, which is reflected by a steady increase in income in the 2000s. In 2015, the law was modified to become a two-child policy to adjust to a changing population and workforce, which will likely result in the average babies per woman beginning to rise.
To conclude, babies per woman and income per capita are affected by war, legislature, and contraception all around the world. This can be seen throughout individual countries' experiences with these different factors and also the global economy as a whole.